I'm Stephen Van Yoder, co-founder of Returns on Wellbeing Institute. Working parents face a lot of challenges, most notably parental leave upon the arrival of a new child. While many working parents want to take time off from work to bond with their new child, many face concerns about work and finances. This is why employers need to consider parental leave as part of a total workplace wellness strategy. Today, to talk about this, we'll be speaking with Sue Campbell and Dr. Amy Beacom with the Center for Parental Leave Leadership and the co-authors of the book, The Parental Leave Playbook. They will explain how companies benefit when they support working parents during their transition to parenthood and offer tips and advice about creating a parental leave program. Thanks to both of you for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Let's start wide. What is the state of parental leave in the country today?
For those who don't know, is we are the only industrialized country and very nearly the only country in the world who does not have a mandated paid leave program, so a federal level paid leave program. So that means in the US, roughly 23% of employees have any form of paid leave, even one day. And that is heavily on birthing parents. So dads, non-birthing parents are largely cut out of that 23%. And that 23% is made up of states that have taken the matters into their own hands and created a program at the state level, or a company that has done the same at the company level. And there's 11 states plus DC that have either enacted or have on the books to enact in the next 2 years a paid leave program.
I would think this imposes a lot of stress, and that's probably an understatement, on new parents. Talk about what you've seen, because we're talking to a group of people for the most part that we want to really understand what this may be doing to their workforce.
So what I just mentioned was really the policy side, the paid leave policy side of things, but which creates its own level of stress. When you're out of work, you have one of the biggest expenses that you may face in your family life. The cost of birth in the United States is ridiculously high. And that's just an uncomplicated birthing process. If there's IVF or any kind of complications for the parents or the child, that can go into the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there's that paid leave portion, but then there's the practice of parental leave in the United States. And my background is in organizational psychology and executive development, leadership development and coaching. And so my focus is always on how can we create workplaces that honor the human being at the core of them while making them sustainable and functional places and wonderful places to work, right? So the practice of how we do this is really an added element of where the stress comes in. There's no process in the US for how to do this well. So that's something I've been working on for 15 years. And that's what we offer through our work.
Well, one of the other impacts that we see because of all of the things that Amy mentioned is attrition, right? A lot of parents are leaving the workforce, either because they are birthing parents and the cost of childcare forces them out of the workplace, or they feel they don't have enough time with parental leave. So they say, this job isn't worth it. I'd rather be with my child. So then we have, a female leadership pipeline that is greatly, greatly diminished. You have a really outsized impact and cost to employers because they're having to replace these employees. And as everyone knows, it's pretty hard to find employees right now in the current employment market. And we see impacts on families as well, right? That stress to the family can lead to divorce. It can lead to health problems. It can lead to perinatal mood disorders for both moms and dads or any gender. So those are some of the other impacts that, are downstream effects of the way we are not set up to manage this well.
You started talking about policy in only 12 states, that's pretty small. But let's sort of wide angle this lens out a bit to employers, right? Because you said some employers are seeing this needs attention and they're doing something about it without being compelled to do it. But what do you think holds other employers back? Where's the gap in seeing the I don't know, cost-benefit analysis, if you will, for doing this?
A lot of people who don't experience parental leave themselves or have in the past when it wasn't something that was discussed in the workplace,
right,
it just doesn't cross their mind, right? It isn't seen as something worthy of paying attention to. I don't think there's any viciousness around it. It's just like, not part of the awareness. But the other reasons are that they think that it's expensive. They think that burden will fall on the company, and they don't want to set something up that they don't know if they can keep up with or meet the demands of. They're fearful that they will start a gender discrimination lawsuit if they do it wrong, or some kind of pregnancy discrimination lawsuit. It feels overwhelming. It feels so big that it requires an enormous amount of attention. And I think one of the biggest things that we've discovered over the years is it doesn't. It's just something that needs to be standardized. And there's very clear best practices. There's an evidence base around this that we've built up over all these years, both in the US and in Australia. And there's just a way to do it that's not a big deal.
Let's sort of see two sides of the ledger, right? You've got the side of the ledger where, okay, it's too expensive, but it's also expensive to lose your talent. It's expensive to have your talent walk out the door with a head full of institutional knowledge and relationships and, you name it. It's also expensive to find replacement talent and bring them back up to where that person was that walked out. What's really at stake here by ignoring this issue and just going with the status quo, which is not to do much of anything about it?
You're losing much more than you're gaining. You're losing those employees that leave, but you're in many cases now also losing the employees that stay. They see what's happening to their colleagues. They see what's happening to the brand, the pride of the company, the sense of mattering and belonging. When somebody becomes a parent, it is the most important time in their life. And when they are seen as being disregarded, not considered, not welcomed, not cared for, that sends a message to the entire organization about how they care for their employees. So that's a piece of that loss as well. Right. And what we see that translate into is worse reviews on Glassdoor. This isn't a good place to work. That attrition piece gets worse. Presenteeism, people staying in their jobs but really being checked out. So there's more sabotage happening. There's just that angsty feeling of frustration.
My favorite answer to the expense question is one that one of our clients actually gave us. And when we were asking him, okay, well, how are you planning to pay for this? And he's like, I'm not and this was a head of people who came from a pretty conservative background in military. And he was the head of people. And he said, I'm not creating a line item budget for this. We've already budgeted for this person's salary. We're already planning to pay them. Right? So it is just a matter of redistributing that work for a short period of time. Okay. And one of the things that we encourage clients to do is take a look at this as a team building, succession planning exercise, right? How can you redistribute this person's work in a way that's going to grow up your junior people, in a way that's going to let other people, test out their skill set and see what they want to do? It's a huge opportunity that we've been throwing in the garbage for, decades and decades and decades, where you can use this as an opportunity to foster employee engagement and make them feel they matter and create that morale building. And you can use it to improve team communication and team skills. Let's
assume you've got a company that doesn't have this in place yet, but they now see, the wisdom, the logic of doing this. What's the process?
Depends on the state you're in, even the city. Sometimes there's city level policies. So understanding your environment is the first place to look. Researching, is there a paid leave program at the city the company at the state level, understanding what those are and what they look like, where any gaps may be. This is often what we're hired to walk companies that are either looking at creating a policy or expanding a policy, walking them through that, letting them know, or so I'm going to say this as if you're doing it yourself.
Right. No, understood.
So looking at projecting out where this is going to go. So looking at the future, where will this be in 1 year? Where will this be in 3 years? For example, if you're in the state of Oregon, Oregon has passed a paid leave program, but that doesn't go into effect for another year-ish. So knowing, okay, when that hits, how will that impact what I'm offering? Do I need to be at a certain level for my employees to match that or rise above it in order to be exempt from having to be in that program, or do I want to join that program? So understanding those things. If you're in a state that doesn't have a paid leave program to benchmark against, it's looking at other states. What is the expectations of your employees? Where's that line? For some places in this country, it feels generous to the employees to have 6 weeks of a gender neutral paid leave at 100% pay. In other parts of this country, 6 weeks is laughable. So we are really at a big mix here. And now as we have more and more multi-state employers and more remote workers, it's really, really complicated. So you're going to we encourage all employees to go as high as they can, so that, and the base is roughly around what FMLA is, so 12 weeks of leave, 100% pay, gender neutral. So meaning for any parent, however they become a parent, foster, surrogacy, adoption, birth, and any type of family, right? So that's one thing, looking at that. And then that's policy piece. So really thinking about how does this policy, and understanding what are you offering already? Do you have a short-term disability policy you can build off of? Do you buy an insurance program that is, there are a few that are starting to come out now, and have that be how you do it? Do you understand, like Sue was referencing earlier, we already have this as a line item, that money is already budgeted for, so we just continue that pay. Whatever that decision is an individual company level decision. So we help put questions in front of people and help them figure that out. But at the same time, what's happening in this country right now is people are just getting on the policy bandwagon. We didn't have the paid leave was included in the Build Back Better Act, and that did not pass. And so that would have been the first time that we had a federally mandated program, which would have been so smart, because it is way too complicated for companies to navigate different level policies at every state, right? So that's unfortunate, and companies really need to understand how that hurts them. They have a knee-jerk reaction against a mandate, but they're not getting into why it would actually be better to have a uniform policy in this country. Okay, so that's one thing. Then the other thing to really consider is your practice. A policy is just words on paper. It is how you enact that policy, how you train your managers, how you communicate that policy to your employees and walk them through it. A lot of companies still think about the return to work, and how do we, they're coming back, maybe they're thinking, how do we integrate them back in? How do we do that? But we really encourage employers to start early, start on the preparing for leave side of things. So in our framework, it's a 3-phase transition: preparing for leave, during leave, and returning from leave. And deep consideration is required, encouraged across all of those phases. Front load on the preparing for leave stage. The easy way I say that is the best way to prepare for leave is to plan your return. So we have people up front doing assessments of their situation. We have a whole assessment process we can get into if you want. Then there's action planning, the leave planning portion for all those elements. There's considerations of how to keep in touch during leave, if at all. And in some places, and that does not mean work, that doesn't mean working during leave. That means keeping in touch. How are you doing? Here's a care package. How is your child? This is an update from work that might be interesting to you. We're doing fine. We miss you. We can't wait for you to be back. No, but without pressure, just care.
Another really important thing I want to sneak in there, talking about the practice side, is the modeling from leadership within the company, right? Mm-hmm. So if someone in company leadership is having a child, they should model making full use of all of their parental leave, right? And we've seen that in the tech sector, where we had some really big high profile CEOs enacting really great policies and then using those policies themselves as well. That sends a huge message to your team.
It seems to me we're in this generational moment where there's a lot of, there were fewer Gen Xers like me than boomers that were ahead of me. And I don't have any statistics, but I would think maybe 20 years ago, there were fewer young adults having their first, family members than the older people. Now, I think we've sort of seen a shift. More boomers are retiring. Gen Xers often in, upper management and those sorts of things. And then you've got a whole group of millennials and Gen Zers coming behind them that are going to be wanting to have families. Are you seeing more employees just in sheer proportional numbers where this is going to be more of an issue in more workplaces, and employers better prepare for it? Because what we are seeing elsewhere in other data is that younger generations, and I'm generalizing, but the data is showing this, they will walk and they will, they look at an employer's reputation. They look at what sort of a employer-employee compact is going on at this company. And this seems to be part of it for one of the most important, events in a person's life. But do you see any urgency to all of this? And then I want to ask you about what your company can do to help people watching this make the move.
That is what this generation that is coming up is about. And there's the obvious ones of like how this affects me. Will I take a job? We're seeing dads saying, no way, I'm only going somewhere where they have a gender equitable program. But we're also seeing people start to evaluate it not just based on themselves, but how that policy is dispersed throughout the company, that it is not a high-level issue. Right. They see this as a social justice issue. This is just that's what it is. Like, if we can't care for our employees at the most important time when they need care, then I don't want to be at that company.
Tell us about your company, though. How do people work with you to put this all into play?
Ways to work with the Center for Parental Leave Leadership. So because Amy is a huge big picture thinker, we come at this from a number of angles. One of the best things that you can do is get your policy ducks in a row so you have a strong foundation policy-wise to build from, but don't stop there. So we help companies do policy, and then we will take you into practice to make sure that that policy is actually enacted in the way that it was intended and in the way that's actually going to show you the benefits of that policy through practice. So that means working with your employees who are expecting parents and their managers. So we have a number of ways you can accomplish this, from very hands-on, private coaching engagement to a more, learning management. People can on-demand access materials. We can do webinars, all of these things. But at the core of it, we want to create an aligned, shared language between employees and managers so that employees feel held and supported and want to stay, and managers understand the critical importance of it and why it is actually to their benefit. It's not a waste of their time. It's not an extra thing that they have to do. It's actually pretty easy to put all of this into practice once you have a framework to follow, and you will reap benefits in ways you didn't even imagine. So that's that side. For HR people, we also have a coach certification program. So in Amy's specific coaching pedagogy called Retain, HR people, internal HR people, the companies can come in and learn that coaching model and framework and then bring that back into their organization internally. Anything you want to add there, Amy?
I just will add that Sue was talking about how those employees could feel held and cared for and that they matter. We have the only evidence-based parental leave assessment tool that exists, and you take this very thorough assessment. It spits out an individual level report for that new parent. We have an aligned manager version of that, so you really understand. It has a risk score. It's a very robust tool that just gives everyone going through the transition a very clear assets and liabilities report. This is what you have working for you. This is what you have working against you. And the goal, of course, is to mitigate those liabilities and increase those assets, because what we know in transition from 30, 40 years of transition work and research is that the more you can increase your assets over your liabilities, the greater your chance of transition success, however you define it. We have the first perinatal mental health screen to be used in a workplace setting. We include that in all of our coaching work and track throughout that full year. 1 in 5 to 1 in 7 new moms suffered from a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. So that could be depression, which is what most people are familiar with. What most people don't know is that 1 in 10 new dads do as well. So that is highly underreported. And so what happens with these individuals who maybe experience some trouble in this area, they go back to work where they are not screened, so they are not helped in time. And so we've brought that into the workplace setting. And what it is just, we have a partner organization called Postpartum Support International. So if the company that we're working with, we either resource through their EAP or through Postpartum Support International. And it's just been so incredible to see how much
I could see that, yeah. Tell people how to reach you.
I guess the best way is through our website, which is cplleadership.com. So there's 2 L's in there, cplleadership.com. And our email is info@cplleadership.com. If you have any questions, please reach out. I began this work almost 16 years ago when I had my first child. So this comes from a very personal place for me. I want everybody to do this well. The Parental Leave Playbook, where we go over a lot of this. All managers and new parents should get it. Companies should be buying it for both. As soon as that new parent announces, they should be getting, their manager and them should be getting this book. But it also comes with a whole web page with action plan templates, tons and tons of resources.
Checklists.
Checklists and workbooks and manager checklists, and out of office message examples or scripts. There's so many things that we want people to do well. I'm really driven by that.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Sue. This has been a very information-packed interview, and we hope some people take note and reach out to you because this is too important to ignore.